Thank you, Acting Speaker. I rise this evening to speak on the Labour Hire Legislation Amendment Licensing Bill 2025. Now, firstly, I do commend the principle behind better regulation of labour hire licensing arrangements in our state. The Parliament has a clear responsibility to ensure that work arrangements are fair, lawful and transparent, especially for those who may be vulnerable or subject to exploitative practices. I am particularly passionate about combating modern slavery and protecting workers from exploitation in all forms. But of course, any regulation needs to be done right and to get the balance right as well. Many years ago, between 2013 to 15, I was the CEO of Victorian Development Corporation in the northwest of Victoria. And I came across and heard about, as well as we heard many stories in the media as well, about modern slavery and labour hire exploitation in horticulture, but also in many other industries. This was also a concern for many farmers in the region as well. This is not just an issue of human rights, but it's also about competition. Most farmers and labour hire contractors do the right thing, but those who are doing the right thing cannot compete fairly on price with those doing the wrong thing, particularly those who might be selling to Woolworths and Coles and others who often do look at price. And many busy farmers as well, particularly during picking season or otherwise, don't want to have to go out of their way to ensure that someone that they take on in terms of a labour hire contractor is getting everything right within their operations and supply chains as well. So it was an issue that I felt was very important to deal with, and we did need to have better regulation across Australia and in Victoria as well. So in 2016, when I was a federal MP, I instigated and led the modern slavery inquiry in Australia as the chair of the Liberal government's Foreign Affairs and Aid Subcommittee. In 2017, we then put out a large number of recommendations, which included that we should have a Modern Slavery Act in Australia, which was then introduced as an act in 2018, which came into force in 2019, which means that those like Woolworths and Coles who are buying products, say from Mildura or elsewhere, have to not just look at price, but they have to look at their own operations and supply chains to work on eliminating modern slavery practices and occurrences. In addition, we also made recommendations under Recommendation 48 that there should be uniform national labour hire licensing. And I note that our particular recommendation said that we should have the establishment of a uniform national labour hire licensing scheme, consistent with a number of other recommendations in the past as well. And one of these was a 2016 Victorian inquiry, which I note was led at the time by in particular the involvement of Professor Anthony Forsyth for the Victorian government. It was an inquiry into the labour hire licensing and insecure work, and the recommendation under Recommendation 13 there was that Victoria advocate for a national sector-specific labour hire licensing scheme. But what has happened since? So in 2017, reflecting a lot of these conversations about modern slavery and labour hire licensing in conjunction with the inquiry I was leading and otherwise, Queensland and South Australia introduced labour hire licensing laws in 2017, Victoria in 2018 and the ACT in 2021. So regulation was needed, but it actually needed to be nationally consistent and it also needed to be done well. But in many regards, it wasn't done well. It wasn't done consistently across jurisdictions. It wasn't done in a uniform national way as recommended in our inquiry. And it has a lot of problems, particularly in border zones like Mildura and other places where you might be drawing labour for farmers or others from Victoria and New South Wales in a situation, say, where Victoria has labour licensing laws, but New South Wales doesn't. And Victoria's laws were not necessarily written in such a way where they would just stop modern slavery and those doing the wrong thing. They, in many ways, created regulatory burdens, or they didn't do things well in terms of trying to help and encourage those farmers and labour hire contractors who are actually trying to do the right thing. So this bill does seek to amend the Labour Hire Licensing Act 2018 to strengthen the definition of labour hire services, sharpen the fit and proper person test for licence holders, enhance the powers of the Labour Hire Authority to investigate and monitor, and expand transparency around licensing decisions. We know that in industries such as construction, agriculture, security and others, labour hire providers and host businesses have sometimes used multi-tiered supply chains to evade obligations, leading to wage theft, misclassification, unsafe conditions and worker vulnerability. The government has stated that it will stamp out the rotten culture in parts of the construction sector. But we've seen many issues of that, particularly through the CFMAU and others over the last few years. This bill does also implement recommendations 3 to 6 of the Wilson Review into construction industry misconduct, and it does strengthen a number of other areas as well. So while the intent of this bill is sound, there are several issues that have been raised by stakeholders. One is that the definition of labour hire may unintentionally capture recruiters, consultants or legitimate subcontractors, as there is no explicit carve-out. Also, the publication powers could allow naming of businesses under investigation without notice or review rights, creating risks of reputational damage. Also, the delegation powers are broad and lack conflict of interest safeguards. And the fit and proper test may treat minor administrative breaches the same as serious offences. So the opposition supports the principle of protecting workers and stamping out exploitation, which is why we are not opposing this bill. But I do hope, particularly in the upper house, that there can be consideration of the introduction and support for amendments to tackle some of these issues that I have raised. As I mentioned as well, we have a number of concerns. Our concerns include small business impact. Many employers, local employers as well, including family-run businesses in Mornington, Mount Martha, Mount Eliza, Mildura or elsewhere, rely on casual labour or subcontractors to operate efficiently. Overly broad definitions or regulatory burdens may unintentionally penalise them. We also have concerns about the clarity of definitions. The term labour hire services must be clearly defined to avoid capturing legitimate contracting arrangements and causing confusion for compliant businesses. We also need proper resourcing of enforcement. Strong laws require strong enforcement. There are many strong laws, not only in Victoria, but in Australia and around the world, where if you don't have proper enforcement in place, the laws can almost mean nothing if they're not done well. And if people know that they can actually get away with something, then they'll do it more and more. And as I saw in Mildura and elsewhere, you get back to the situation where farmers and labour hire contractors who are actually trying to do the right thing cannot compete fairly. And you have people whose human rights are abused, whether it's in a debt bondage situation where they may have their passports taken, or where you're abusing backpackers or Pacific Islands or anyone who has come who is especially vulnerable to abuse here in Australia and may not have the languages, or the language skills or the knowledge of our local laws to be able to cope. I note as well some opposition concerns around whistleblower protections. Workers must feel confident to report breaches without fear of detriment or retaliation. So we definitely need to get this balance right. So we do support the government's aim of raising standards, but we call for constructive amendments to ensure this legislation is fair, practical and delivers real protections, not unnecessary burdens on farmers, labour hire contractors or others who are trying to do the right thing. Thank you, Acting Speaker.